Gyrji Shayach Satini. Yeawa Hakach Ye and the gun. Yag Akwan on the Kach. Yáay Hít Adat Wushuch Atushat. Ya Yées kootéeyaa Kinde aya Shagachtus ya Achtu Yáay Adat. Ya Shtakat Adayeti Kadua Chaku. Akaawa Chaguchsa aya ate ilqaini. Yekakisatin. Kunach Yáay at akach. We wasadu asakwe at kachaku. TJ Young again? TJ Young awa akawa chaku. Gedeen awa aushagug. Ade awa katuchak ya kootéeyaa. Ya awa gashtu aya aushatu. Robert Davidson. Ya awa hutsa konachwe aushagug. Ade katuchak ya kootéeyaa. Ya Alaska Heritage Institute hastu tawasagu naskchin kat Yées kootéeyaa aya akwan on kach. Ye awe adat wushuch autu wushatkin. We kundanasa wudu waqig. Ya Yáay klein awe kutsati. Heshwasa uti. Awe ya kan hastu tu yeti. Kunsa ake 10 million, 10 million kwashkiwe. Kan hastu tu ye wutin. Khatqa heshwasa uti. Yake at Yáay Hít. Tzid you do a sock. We humpback. Yáay at yashtakat we whale. Glate Yáay beluga. Tzid humpback. Just dacha awechosaku. Ye awe yachtsu. We uski we chashugu we anka. We uski yakayeti shkun klein. Shukwa aya an kaye wuti weta. Kone aya aushayech we yake at akawe uskia hade kawajesh. Ye awa we yake wush kanachutu da aakwa uhan. Ye yachwaka. Shukwa aya chwaach kahani chedach. Nask kat kootéeyaa hatu wasagu. Kinde aya shautus yaayi ya ha'anikuk khatqa yuk we tlél take Yáay hasa shech uhan qua nasjin kat kootéeyaa yuk awe chauk atlen kootéeyaa aya wudus tini chitle aya yashinkadani dewo kuch yisatin we kootéeyaa qa yisaku adu anisa ayeyati. Wana ni saweqoa nakne ti duasako at Ḳugáasʼ hiti tsate. Yequ saqa tlél ayachuti tlél ushkeye at. Dekian qawo de tawasagul de katwe kootéeyaa aaxay sagani. Yewune. Achawe has to inkachwanik we Alaska Heritage Institute. Just like kootéeyaa achtuasagu. Dana kach has our jak we Ḳugáasʼ taki hiti. Akawe achtuasagu kan kagid yuch a'tánk kasa llechi. Yat ayach cha ade hanai shukatku. Tlél ayachuti ade kutunugu ya chaak. Chakuta tlél qa. Uhan qoa at kahini has qoa at kahini. Ajoyach tuasagu yisaku. Tlél ayach uti. Qacht dak yehas awusneiyí. Aqa hatuasagu dana yijite gachtuti. Qa Yées kootéeyaa gachtuti yech. Ha jid adak at a hini. Ye awa gwallqodne a de ye gachtus nech ye we kuu yaak. Tlchat a tlchosatin we kootéeyaa sagani. Ḳusteeyí a yéwune. Ach tu yéwuti wasa atwune ha anikak. A joyach tu ke Yées at kek a gwallnasjin kat a. Yaag ḳusteeyí su shukwa a we kootéeyaa shadutsanugu. Guksa ḳusteeyí shukwa a. Gwall carcross a hawutian. Ḳusteeyí ka Shaawát a hawutian. Carcross dachtahin a ḳusteeyí. Kootéeyaa shadutsanug. Yéil ha aanax ha tuwasagu wudutsaku. Aanax soy kootéeyaa qutsati. Wan qanins ʼatánk chakut edach. Just low man on the totem pole I has ʼatánk yisukuke da soe a kootéeyaa. Wan nachse akaawa wuti. Oh, tlél. Tlél kootéeyaa de yuchitani. Tlél antin a. Kacha'aq tilla antin ka ichallatu. Tlél na aya just ziyak yi challatu. Naski a yuchatangi. Achuktin. Nana na. Chushtu idishe. Wan qanins khandain yor ditzaka. Wan qanins just achuktin. Ye owe ach awlatu ach kak klein kuch. Hu owe ḳusteeyí. Washington D.C. a hawutian. Ye jitunean yuch. Ḳusteeyí a. Ho yik क़usteeyí ach kak huqa. Chushtu idishi. Chat. Tlach tuwa ushku. Atwatu shuqadan. Ya tulla antin a. Wan qanins qanachawi wush tutzachan hatuwasagu wujin at tushuqu. Ye awe a joyi challatu. Wan qanins a khan etuyena teach. Chak awe wedayach yuchiwatan. Ka yadayach ka jin. Ya yagush. Ya chech ka tlek plain. Akade kinde kakwa a yata. Akayeoka. Nana Akach awe egush shakich. Kuk ki tuch. Qeqa ituas kutlagahu. Gunachisha heiti sa ahi. Yideka kunik le qaqinach. Shukwaya akaawa. Adusa dutuasaku yuqiwatani. Okay.
What's that do a sock Juancain? Not sure if I'm saying that right.
Wan qanins. It's sometimes.
Gee.
Adusaya khadagwash. Adusaya. What?
Oh, it's like just let's do a walkthrough so that there's no misunderstandings. So before we started recording, I was telling things I think are fun. Although one time I was teaching stuff kind of like this, there's other terms too. I guess we're just going to get right into some of these terms. Sometimes you need them. And I was like, they're kind of bad. I don't know. And then someone got really upset in the class and said, why are you teaching it to us? And I said, well, sometimes you got to say things. But a lot of times they're said in teasing. So maybe I'll start there and then we'll go back to the beginning. So there's three phrases I was thinking of today for whatever reason. Well, I guess because we were talking about taking a group into Fred Meyer's and speaking Tlingit, and somebody saying to us, to a group of students, if they want to live here, they need to learn how to speak English. And this would be an appropriate response, and then you could translate to them if you want to. So the first phrase was nana'i, and that phrase means death for you. The nana'i na is death for you, take it. Sometimes said teasingly, like if, I can't remember, I was teasing someone, we're all just laughing, having fun. And I teased them, and then they said that back to me. And we just kept laughing because it was funny. So they're like, go die. I was like, ha ha ha. But if you said nana'i, and then you put your thumb between, like the letter T, I think is in sign language, right? And they were teaching kids at a Tlingit school program. Use this if you need to go to the pot. Because they're trying to teach them through Tlingit a lot. But in Tlingit, this means chushtu idishi. So chushtu idishi means, oh, here comes the elder. It means, go touch yourself inside. And this means stick it up your rear end. And so when you say nana'i and then spit, then you go, and then you shake it at them. And that's when people really want to fight. So I was sharing that with you folks. But then to back it up, other things I was talking about as we got the class started was there's a new totem pole that was unveiled downtown. So I was saying, they demonstrated it in front of the people. You could also say they brought it out in front of the people. It's like they walked it out. So there's different ways you could talk about some of these things. And then is it was lifted up by the head. So they stood it up. So I think there's one other way to talk about raising a totem pole. So I was trying to talk about it hasn't been raised, but it's going to be raised. And that there's Sea Alaska Heritage Institute wants there to be 30 totem poles up in the Juneau community, which I think is amazing. Because then I started thinking about and talking about, a long time ago when you came to a Tlingit village, you would see a bunch of totem poles. And then you would know whose land it was, and there was a bunch of stuff that it just was a visual language. But at some point, some of the religious leaders started telling people that God wants you to burn it down. And convince people and probably force people to burn them all down. And I never saw it, but it's in my mind, it's in my memory, and it stays, these stories stay with us about these times when all these things were taken from us. So they did a big whale statue downtown. I thought it was kind of cool. I was like, yeah, that's cool. Some people were really mad because it was very expensive. I was like, I don't know. It's kind of cool. I got no problems with it. And then they had a little whale downtown, and then they brought that's where the whale came from that's on campus here. When they started building the big one, they brought that one here and then built a whole big space for the big one that's down there. But then I was joking because we're at some meetings in the artist committee when they started telling us this plan of 30 years, or 30 totem poles. I said, well, I see your whale and I raise you 30 totem poles. So it was really fun to think about that stuff. And then that probably got me thinking about nana'i and chushtu idishi, which would probably be what I'd say if people told us to burn our totem poles down today. And the first one I saw raised was, I think in Carcross, but maybe it was Ḳugáasʼ. I think it was in Ḳugáasʼ. Because I remember seeing it, and then I helped with a couple of raisings. I helped with one in Carcross, which was the first one they'd done in like 100 years. And then T.J. Young is, I think, the carver downtown is amazing. And he was taught a lot of things by Robert Davidson. I think that's most of what I said. And it's very sunshiny here in Juneau. Wow. Our little camera's struggling. The light's right in my eyes. Okay. Any questions or thoughts? Shikshani ki kwasasiyeti. Hesh pasachat uti. Yeshat kiatzkuch yisitineget kutia yaha anikuk.
I asked my dad was a carver, and he carved the totem out at ÁAÞW, the one that got burned.
Oh.
And I said, how come we don't have tall totem poles here? He said, because we don't have the trees. So I think that's how they came up with the house posts that were carved to represent, instead of having poles outside. If you went inside the building, you would see them decorating the poles, the posts of the house.
Sheesh. Gáasʼ aayí do a sock. Gosh hit aayí. Ya konach ya kootéeyaa ḥusteeyí. Shakes you do a sock. At gosh tlél ḥaqinach. Tlél get saai. Shakes. Kitchana shkat kwan. Ye awech teidí. Suits canteen has cool gowan. At the wood ḥusteeyí. Wasa has a yawatlach yellingit. Suits canoe has a yawatlach yellingit. Shakes has a cash at the honey. Ye awaka is sai ḳugáasʼ aayí that. Ye awa a day yawatlach ye. We saw shakes. Do hit gáasʼ ţúteejí. Take khunachawe at kachak at he. Do sai away. Yées do a'áḳw. Yées do a'áḳw. Hu away knach awusneiyí. Away Yáay Hít has outliech. We tool.aan. Qanach teidí hití aya. Has our adat we qa. Ajwe hu away has wuchuch. Hade. Dana yiji digach tuti. Gáasʼ aya. Kichak. Yées. Kitchana adachaya wuchuch tool.aan ade. Dujiye wutien. Duk da lluni away akaawa we what's that do sago at aayí away qone akakha kawshahit adikak wachak ye away tool.aan akaawa ḥusteeyí tin kach aya we gan away akaaye wutien gan to tluk qa gosh achjiwa ayahay let's say Ďuchsa.
Jacuzzi.
Ja, du. Ideka konikata. Ja, du dach a kutzeti. Gáasʼ. Yées do a'áḳw awa. Hu awa akaawa yata. Ye gan to tluk tla. Yata tsu gan to tluk. Weta koa. Golki we llach aayí awa hicht. Ya koa. Ataia. Yéil. Qadaqadate golkiwe. Kathatsewa kakweitaqa. Golwaits ook. Ja, hasse aayí awe qannach teidí tachonach ik Ja, de qoa. You sago at. Siw, you do a sag. Ja, Ja, de qoa. Shadakuchu. Shadakuchu. Wait, Kuch. Yisekuke dasawe, yana eight. Kone kek kwa yana eight. Kone aya ye kek kwa khween. Ja, kek a khween yana eight kek a khween. Kuch. You do a sago at. Kuch. You do a sag. Wait, atsu. Kach. Yet atsu chosatin. Shukt. Achkeit. S'ach. Sich. Gantu tlukhu. Sich. Sheishuch. What's that do? Kutdaat. Yata. Kudas. Ye awa. Klekudzi awa. Ya hastu hiti. Tuk on aayí wuti. Ka jistu achch. Ya ach kak ko aayí awa ka. Ka ji yistu achch. Ye awa hu awa akaawa chak. Weta. Gáasʼ. Kesh weta ko a. Shkit le ka. Gwashkewe akaaw shikit. Kulchish. Any questions about that?
Yana 8. I was thinking that's a plant, right?
Yeah.
So how were you making that connection to the hat?
Anybody?
Sorry?
Did anybody catch it?
I thought it was like the rice.
No, that one's kuch. Kuch.
Oh.
Which is because kuch is rice. Kuch is the thing that I'm talking about now, and then kuch is pitch or bubble gum.
Yeah, because I knew you were talking about pitch, and I thought it was something to do with the Yéil story where he tells the Shuni. I was like, okay.
It's a funny moment where someone's like, "Did you say kuch? I thought you said kuch." No, I said kuch. Oh, it sounded like you said kuch. I was like, "Are we saying the same thing?" Let's just go crazy. But kuch is the name of the flower of Yáay Hít. So Yáay Hít has a flower which is called kuch, and the name of this type of hat with these rings on it is called shadakuchu. So it means the Yáay Hít flowers around the head for some reason. It's really wild. And then if you look at the plant, well, I have to go to another. We'll use all the slideshows today. I'll show you another one, just for fun.
This is from that book that has like Simshan, Haida, Tlingit, all of these different. What is this book called again?
Well, this one, it's probably in a bunch. It's probably in almost every book about Northwest
It's
Coast.
an old historic photo. I don't know whether
Yeah,
it's
I swear I've
Winter
seen this.
Pond
Like,
or one of the others, but
So this is a very famous photograph. Yeah, pond and whatever the person was. You can find it in probably the Tlingit Indians. You could probably find it in the Jonitis Northwest Coast Art and History book. And this was in Ḳugáasʼ, and it's a house called Yáay Hít, the whale house. And then this is called the rain screen. And I was thinking about this because our elder talked about house posts, which are called gáasʼ. But then I started thinking about this person named ḵusteeyí, who was a master artist. And they made these two house posts here. And the stories I was told was there's someone named Shakes, which I think they say Shakes in Tlingit, but it's also not a Tlingit name. So they had a big fight with the Tsimshian and defeated them. I'm not trying to start any beef with any Tsimshian peoples, but they took their leader's name. So the Tlingit leader took the Tsimshian person's name. So I'm taking your name. And so he started claiming that name and had these house posts built, which I think there's replicas in the library here, down in Wrangell at his house. And then people started hearing about these amazing house posts. And I think the folks up in Ḳugáasʼ sent for that carver, said, you're going to make two of them in our house as well. And so they hired this carver, ʼatánk, who was on a boat from Wrangell to Ḳugáasʼ and had duq dashuni, bark of a cottonwood tree. And that's where he made the models. I don't know where the models went, but he made models of these two house posts. And I think was probably talking to people about what should be on them. And on this one on the left, you have the woodworm, the woodworm's mother, the worm again. I think that's a heron. I can't remember. It might be a crane, douche. And a frog. And the other side, I was also getting foggy. I think there's ʼqunaqadate is on here. Oh, no, this is a Junwu. There's a raven and a king salmon, I think Junwu and ʼqunaqadate. And then this is called ʼqeen. That's the word for a wall screen. This one is called ʼsiuqeen, the rain screen. And then I just started talking about things that I was seeing here. Kootéeyaa is a apron. Tlakt is a bentwood box. Tlakate is a mask. Tz'aach is a hat. And this is called gáasʼ, the woodworm feast dish.
When you're referring to a master carver, does it change is that, because the ḳugáasʼ is his name, is the gáasʼ referring to, or does anything change when you're referring to a master carver compared to a carver?
So the verb down here, let me pull this up a little bit, is akaawa.aaḳw. So I would usually say kách'aaḳw ʼatánk. So they have mastered this. So ʼatánk is a really interesting word because it means master or boss. But I would also just say pay attention to how it works. ʼatánk is the word for the house leader. Yéil is the boss of if you have a job, that could be your boss. Untitled is the word for a mayor. But then you start getting into like different things, like with ʼatánk after it means you've kind of mastered that thing. But then, like I would think, like you could have fun with it, like káaḥww would probably be like a master coffee brewer. But some of them, like now ʼatánk is an alcoholic. So now, like, who's the master now, right? So, and then I use that term sometimes too if I'm lightly scolding my children. I'd say, you're not my boss, because they'll try and get all bossy. And then, but yes, that's how I would, but I would also say, away, awusneiyí. So awusneiyí. So there's these two verbs, awusneiyí and awusneiyí. Awusneiyí is to know information. Awusneiyí is to know how to do it. Like you could know everything there is about baseball. Like you could know like all the players and what it takes to win and how to put a team together. But if you can't get out there and hit the baseball, then you can, that's awusneiyí. Like you know how to do the thing, which I think is important. And I think this could work for our language too. Because for me, when you say ʼatánk, I would say, okay, they know tlingit, like I can talk to them. But if I said ʼatánk, it means they really know how to speak it.
Hune, could you put that in the chat, that
Ah,
the know how to speak and ʻsteeyí?
So kunach awusneiyí.
awusneiyí. We'll go look that one up.
I'm intrigued by that name.
Mhm.
Ḳugáasʼ. Is that a person whose hands understand?
Yeah, that's another good question. Okay, so let's go back to that. So this is how I've usually seen it. Ḳugáasʼ. But then another thing I was saying is I was talking with my uncle Nathan, and he said that the name is Yéis. And I said, well, that makes a lot more sense from a language perspective, which names are really interesting because you could also write this as just a single big giant word because it all probably smushes together. And so whenever we write people's names, it's just a tricky thing. But so Yéis would mean for the people. Du'ach would mean it is heard. Like people hear it. It can or it can be heard. It is audible. Kind of depends on the context for that one. So like ċhaach, when you put this CH on there, and this is one that's the CH sometimes does some different things. We were doing this in advanced Tlingit the other night. But if you said ċhaach, you're saying, I'm able to hear it. And that's why you could say, ʻatánk, are you able to hear me? Like if I had a bad cell phone connection or something, or Zoom was freezing up on me. But yes, that's a really interesting name. And not every name has like an obvious meaning as well. Some of them are very cloudy, and then some people will say, my name means this. And then you hear it and you're like, well, it means something a little different. But those are always tricky situations, and never tell an elder that they've been saying their name wrong, because I've heard about that happening. So just give you a little warning. Okay, so let's look at this verb. So there's these two that we're going to look for. So we're going to look up koo, and we're just going to sort of, the purpose of looking at these two verbs is just to get into these finer points of meaning and also a little bit about use as well. So this verb, so what we will focus on is this information here. We're not really going to worry about like this stuff over here that's more advanced. There is an object, there's a subject, it's an S classifier, and koo. The little h means if you put a repetitive suffix on here, it's going to stay low. It's usually going to be long and low. Don't worry about this squiggle. What this squiggle means is it's telling you that it has stem variation. That means it'll go short and high, it'll go long and high, it'll go long and low. In the future, we're not going to use that anymore. There's some people who might, but I'm not going to use it because stems are variable by nature. So there's a group of us that are saying, well, let's mark the ones that don't change, because that's very few of them. Almost all of them change. It's a zero conjugation, and it's an event verb. So just like we've been talking about all of this stuff. So once you see zero, you should know that the command form will be ʻsaku. It's kind of a strange command, though, to say, know it! Like that's a weird thing to boss someone around about. But you do see this in this, like I'm beginning to know it. Like if you want to talk about I'm learning how to carve, I'm learning how to speak Tlingit. Ya, nach, sa, queen. And so then you got ya, nissa, queen, āanax, yantusaqueen, yanaisaqueen, yasanasqueen, yandusqueen. So there is something to note here. If a verb root ends with OO, if you close that, it will turn into WEI. So that's why you got queen. And this is, you will see this. This happened to us just yesterday. We were in the language nest. We had an we all did this little fun thing where we make these little stories. And then I was laughing with our elder there, Ḳugáasʼ Florence Shakely, because she was saying in Tlingit, my story is very little. And then she was like, boom, drops this gigantic Tlingit story on the table for us. It was very fun. But she said, Achit achtisweich. And then that led me on this whole, in the advanced Tlingit, we did a whole bunch of woo verbs for sending and receiving, ordering and sending things through the mail, it was wild. It was fun. But the same thing. So that one goes from woo to, in this case, it was weich, but here you go from ku to queen. So there's another one. There's a song that goes, Ye ya yana gwena he de ki de he he ha he ya ha ye da de ha aya. So ye yana gwen a he de kit. So the verb there is yawagu. Yawagu is for a school or for like a, what do you call it, a flotilla, a pod of killer whales to be swimming or moving, and then, or a group of boats to be going together. So it goes to yawagu. But if it's happening right now, it's ya yanagween. Hade ya yanagween, the killer whales are coming this way. And then the second part of it, so ye ya yanagween he de kite, the killer whales, right? Then it says Yesh da de ha aya, going around the raven, a pod of killer whales. So you'll see it, you'll hear it in the language, and then I think as you learn more of these things, you'll start to spot them. Like, oh, is this that thing where that vowel changes? Because they do. The ones that change are the double O and the double A. Okay.
Okay.
Huh.
Does the double A go to A to EI also?
It goes to EI, and the double O goes to WEI.
Ah,
And so then we get, let me check the chat. Yeah, so yak is a canoe, and then cha, oops, just a tone on the first one. Cha is a fleet of canoes or a pod of killer whales. So a single canoe goes yanakuch, and a single killer whale goes probably Yáay. And then both of them, the group, would go Yawagu. And we will be getting into a little bit on motion verbs. They change a lot, and we'll talk about the ways that they change. But this is one of the ways, is if you have a single or a plural. But a really cool thing I think in Tlingit is killer whales and canoes are of the same, they kind of do a similar thing, where if there's a group of them, you call them cha, and if they're going together, it's yawagu, so they travel in a pod. But also, if you see more than one canoe, you can also call it a war party, which sort of tells us that we got in our canoes to go fight quite a bit. That was the past.
Wait, so yawagu means they go together like a pod, and that could be Heat, or it could be something else.
Yeah, it could be Keat or it could be a fleet of boats. I mean, it could be porpoises as well, which we ate porpoise. We don't do it anymore, but there was, I gotta remember what porpoise oil was good for. It's like putting on some kind of wood. So if you really want to be an old school carver, you're gonna have to go get yourself a cheech. Something about the fat. I want to get rid of the fat. I'll ask my teacher again. He knows. Ḥusteeyí. See, this is knowing information, right? Ḳusteeyí, Yéis, awusneiyí, watuseiyí, Yéis, hus-awusneiyí, wadudsneiyí. It is known. You can change the object, so I could say ʼatánk, I know you. ḥusteeyí, you know me. And I could say awusneiyí, they know you. Awusneiyí, we know you all. We all know you. ḥusteeyí, you all know me. Right? So you can start doing these combinations. And then but look at, just for now, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty details, but remember, you can't just put tlél on front of it. Awusneiyí, tlél awusneiyí. Ḥusteeyí, tlél ḥusteeyí. So the classifier must change to sa, and the stem must be short and high. So just remember that. Tlél watuseiyí, we don't know. Watuseiyí, we know. Okay, now we'll go to the gook. And then we'll take a break. So to know how to do something, it's a different verb. It's a state verb, which means there can be an imperfective. There is an object. There is a subject. It's an SH classifier, and it's gook. If it's marked high, it will not go low. Just remember that. So here, because it's ga, you have gashgook. Again, I don't think you would command someone, learn how to do it. Maybe, I don't know. Get mad at them for something. Seems a little grumpy to me to say that. Ashagook, they know how to do it. And then you could say, chashagook, I know how to do it. Tushagook. But remember, like you are saying, you have kind of mastered that skill. So I have heard people sometimes say, tlingit chashagook. I was like, oh, really? Okay. Not that, go for it. If you know how to do tlingit, go for it. Kesh ushgook, they don't know how to do it. Aushgook. So this is one I would use for someone who was long time ago. Like if I was talking about ʼqajiyis a'axch, ʼqanachawe aushgook, ʼatánk. They really know how to carve. They really knew how to carve things. But for someone right now, I would use like anyanki, ʼqanach ashgook, ʼatánk. Wayne Price really knows how to carve. Okay. To cut that yisaku, Yáay Hít. You guys know it all now. Yisaku. You know some of it. Yisaku.
Diego gang.
Tell you guys one more little short story, okay? We're all doing a bunch of language work probably a decade ago. Nora was still alive. A colleague of mine named Zeus, James Crippen, who's a good friend of mine as well. He was in town, and then we were all visiting, and he said, there's this guy that Tlingit guy at Costco who looks at your receipts, and he's not around anymore, but said, oh yeah, he's like a big guy, right? He's like, yeah, he says, Tlingit awusneiyí. I said, he knows Tlingit? I said, really? He says, yeah, Nora told me. So I said, I'm gonna talk to him, because I was all excited. So I went to Costco, and I gave him my receipt, and he's got his marker, and he's going down. So I took a deep breath, and I said, Tlingit káx'w. And then he looked at me, and he goes, His marker stopped right away, and he looked at me and goes, and then he just kept marking his thing down. It's a very fun answer to, do you understand Tlingit? And he's a little bit, so yeah, it was fun. Okay. Take a break. We got started a little late, so let's just take a 5-minute break. 6-minute break, and then we'll come back. 9:45. Yáay Ḥugáasʼ Shaawát. There's a bit of a story behind this one, and it's kind of a fun story. It's kind of fitting, I think. So I was involved with a project several years ago, probably a decade ago, where Tlingit and Haida had a Head Start curriculum that they had handed off to Gold Belt Heritage Foundation with the intention of adding Tlingit language to it. They reached out to me, became one of my summer projects. I kept seeing these really cool illustrations referencing these books, but the books were not in any of the files that they sent me. So I kept asking about them, nobody knew. Somebody who was at their last day working for Tlingit and Haida said, oh, before I leave, here's the contact information for the artist. He might know something about it. So I got a hold of this artist in Seattle, and he had all of these 9 books. So he sent me these 9 books. They were great. I don't know the whole history about who told all of the stories, where they got them. Some of them are Haida versions and Tsimshian versions of stories where I know the Tlingit version, but they were all in English. So I took them to Káx'w, George Davis, and Shakshani, Marge Dudson, and they translated 5.5 of them. Then the other 3.5, I translated one with a group in Sitka, then we did another half, and then the rest were finished in Teslin. So they're still sort of going through, I think, a little bit of finesse work, just in terms of, sometimes when you just really chunk it one sentence at a time, it doesn't have a flow, and then there's probably going to be typos and other things. So we will go through this, and then as I sort of put the book and put it into a book form, I forgot to put the English translation for this story in. So even though I haven't, I'll pretend that I don't, and you folks are going to save me. Y'all are going to save me. So we're going to go through this. The way it'll work is I will read, this is a single page in the book. I separated the sentences. I will read them all, then we'll go through, and y'all will take turns reading a sentence, and we will translate it as we go. Getting this fun story, which I think might be the only Tlingit version. It's the only one I've seen. I've heard this story several times, but always in English. So it's called Yéil, Xugáasʼ Shaawát, Raven and the Fog Woman. Yéil wulatish, akashat tuwati. Wekashat dahani Xugáasʼ Shaawát du inakawa ni Yéil. Ya akindu wawati isik akashat tuwati. Yáay Hít ya aksi tlél at ʼatánk ya ḳusteeyí. Tlak tool.aan teen, tlak du'in itu tool.aan. Tlél unatini ʼatánk iguxlatlid. Yéil yawsaka, tlak isi tin ke tool.aan. Okay, I need a reader for this sentence.
Yéil wulatish. Crow is lonely.
We'll call Raven.
Raven is lonely.
Yeah, away. And Raven and Crow is interchangeable when you go inland. It's really interesting to me. Also, earlier I said one qanins. For inland speakers, you would say mayati. I need a reader. Okay, so yeah, Raven was lonely. How about this one?
Akashot to a T.
Akashat to a T. Jeez.
To a T is in his mind.
In his mind, yeah, or in this case, he wanted to akashat. So we got to do a little bit of looking around here. And I'm going to give you a big hint. This is not, the verb root is not shot. And so I think I'll just sort of walk you through this one because it's a little bit advanced. And I'm going to tell you about a form, a verb mode that you can start to use just by looking it up. And there's actually two of them that are closely related. So there is a shot verb right here, but I know all of these shot verbs which have to do with catching or holding, gusting wind, changing one's mind, these are all high-toned only. There's no low-tone version of it. I also have an inside scoop on this, and it is the verb to marry somebody. And so what we're looking at here is if we go down, there is a hortative verb. So this is let them do it. And there usually, this could be let me do it, let us do it, let it happen. Tlingit uses these a lot. Let it be that way. Yéil qati, ʻatánk ti tlingit. When you get into wishing and hoping and praying, you're usually going to throw a hortative verb in there. If you look up the hortative verb and you throw a T on the end, that's kind of getting into this so it could happen type of verb, which is kind of advanced, but I could say, if I was talking to my wife to be, we're already married, but if I could say, ʻatánk ʻkashat, I came, or ʻatánk ʻkashat, I came here so I could marry you. So what we have here is akashat, so he could get married, which in this case, he wanted to get married. That one is a little bit advanced, but I did tell them when we started translating these stories, I said, and my kids were pretty little at the time, I said, I said, my kids eat real food. I want them to hear real language. I said, don't baby it up. Give me the big stuff. And I'm glad I did, because they gave us some good stuff. Okay. Who hasn't read yet? You get a nice long sentence.
We ka shade honey ḳugáasʼ Shaawát duin akaawa ya kin du wawadi I sik agashat tuati.
Sheesh. And that might be, I'm going to change this to, well, no, it's got to be akashat. Okay, sorry. All right, so let's go in little chunks through here. Do we know, so we is that, but do we know ḳashadahani?
Chief.
Yeah. So the leader, the chief, the headman, like however we want to say that, right? What's that?
Could it mean boss too?
Yeah, like well, like
Or
in
just Shada Honey is boss.
So ḳā is persons, and then sh is head, shade is towards the head, and then hun is stand. So when you put it together, it stands towards the head of the people. And that's how you say a leader. What if we changed ḳā to na? Na shaddahani.
Clan leader.
Yes. Stands at the head of the clan. So especially for inland communities who have not changed their system of governance. So in the United States, they negotiated with the federal government and adopted this, most commonly president, vice president, CEO type of structure, which was dictated by the government. Said, if you become this, you're more eligible for more things. So a lot of tribes did that. For a lot of First Nations in Canada, they said, well, we have our clans. The clans have one person who gets elected as Na Shaddahani. Then from the pool of Na Shaddahani, we elect a Qa Shaddahani. I don't think that Qa Shaddahani was an old thing, myself. I think you just had Na Shaddahani, and then or you'd say Na Shaddahani, because you would pluralize the verb. Naq is the plural of hun. So the standers at the head of the people. But anyways, there's the leader.
Ka na kla.
Yes, and na tla. So you would have. Well, this is how I think it worked. Let's say a long time ago, we lived in a village. There were 4 clans, and then all those clans would have houses. Every house would probably have a hit'ati and a na tla. So they would have a house master and a house boss, I don't know, and then you would have a clan mother. Those two would go and represent the clan and not make decisions, but would represent the decisions that were already made. And then as they were negotiating with the other clans, they said, we got to change this up. They said, okay, we'll go back, tell our people, we'll consult, we'll come back. And so they represent the decisions, they weren't the decision makers. Then I think if you had situations where you said, okay, we got 4 clans and we got 10 houses, this is really getting tricky, we need to boil this down to 4 people. Then they would probably say, okay, we'll select Na Shaddahani to go forward and do this boil down process. But I don't think they had a Qa Shaddahani, because one person would not be. But again, it's not a decision maker. So maybe if like the Russians show up to trade and they say, just send one person out, they would probably send 2, but then they would probably have a Qa Shaddahani who would say, but again, not a decision maker, just someone who says, I can represent the consensus of our group. And then they were back and forth. So they would say, okay, Russian person, what do you want? Okay, here's what we want. Let me go back, talk to my people. And then they would sort of go like that.
Gwell Daisling Kwan Yayawaka Kasha de Honey works for us.
Yep. Yeah, so they are not like, they're not the king.
Which
Right?
sometimes I don't like to hear, but it's like they work for the people. And
Right.
so, yeah. So
And it's a job, right?
yeah.
You get paid. You're
really
also,
well.
you have to,
Do work.
and you can get voted out. And it's an election process, really neat.
Yeah, it's a blend of the two now. It's like we have like a democracy with our clan-based governance, and so
Okay.
yeah, changing every year.
Right. So this is a name, I'll tell you folks that, but there are 3 parts in that name.
Fog hat.
Fog, but what is khat?
Oh, ooh.
Fish.
Ah.
And then kanach. It's going over it. So we'd call them fog over salmon, That's his name. What about do'een akaawa?
Neek is the story verb, right? Or is that the telling verb?
It's the telling verb, but there is, you could say do'een akaawa. If you said do'een akaawa, that would be they told them the story of it.
Do'een is with, as in to talk with or to tell with, tell to,
Yes.
tell to.
So
He told him.
this does have an object. So this is to tell, this verb akaawa is to tell information. Right? So I'm going to tell you about the barbecue. I'm going to tell you about the ḳusteeyí. I'm going to tell you about celebration. I'm going to tell you about what we're going to do next week. I'm going to tell you about your homework for Thursday, right? Those would all be akaawa verbs. In most cases, it's going to be a third person object, and it's just going to be it. I will tell it to them or to you. So this first part, do'een, ach'een, i'een, hastu'een, ye'een, ká'een, hastu'een, that's the part where you're saying who is getting told. This is called an indirect object. It's still part of the verb, but this is, if you said, because for example, I could say, ach'een akaawa. They told it to me. Now I'm just focused on the information here. But if I said, do'een akaawa, that means they told on me. And that's usually getting into like the realm of tattletale, like I was up to no good and then they told on me. So this is one where the object is usually third person. So in this case, and we have both third persons here, so really saying they told it to them, which maybe I'll write here. And then if you said akaawa, that's told the story of it. And if you said ḥugáasʼ, told stories. So those are different, right? So when we get akaawa, told it, right? And these are all they, third person they. I'm just leaving that part. Could you like so, serious word about transitivity today. So akaawa told it information. Akaawa told the story of it. ḥugáasʼ told stories. Now what about this part? Yéil.
Raven.
Yeah, there we go, Raven.
I felt bad offering that one. I should do something more.
So let's talk a little bit about word order here. Ḥugáasʼ Shaawát. In the context here, like once we mention this person, and then we say the verb, and then Yéil, that word order, so it's saying leader, they told them, Raven, that means Raven's doing the telling. Okay? And the way that we know this is we start out with, the first sentence is Raven is lonely. So now we're going to assume everything is Raven doing stuff, saying stuff, unless it's specified otherwise. He wanted to get married, so the leader, fog over salmon, and we're going to say Raven told him. So we're going to make some adjustments. oops, him. And now we get,
Okay.
oh,
If there wasn't Yéis after to'aan, akaawa, would it be confused? Would then there be potential for confusion?
I don't think so. I would still say Raven's doing it. What would happen is they would say, we kashat the honey, hooch away. He is the one who does it. And now that's a subject. So I think it kind of has to force the subject switch to happen. And if it doesn't force it, then usually it's the same, it's this main character who's doing stuff.
So is putting Yéis in there necessary, or is it
No.
just?
It's just like it's a little
Not
reminder.
necessary.
So now we get this business. ʼatánk. And
Or little daughter.
yes. So this would be your youngest daughter. And we'll go over how this is working.
Is that the marry verb again? The I want to marry.
Yeah. So then we'll move that to the front. I want to marry your youngest daughter. So here we have this. We're going to put a couple things down here. Aqin and aanax. So these are like two sides of the teeter-totter. So this is less than it, and this is more than it. And so you can use them to say in a bunch of different ways, right? So less weight, more weight, less time, more time, whatever the things are. But aqin and aanax, those are opposite concepts. One is more, one is less. This is what we have here is you could say do what, and that would be they or someone grew up, right? So you usually hear like what, I grew up, and you might say at a place or something. There is you could switch a classifier here to S, awusneiyí, and that's they raised them. But in this case, do what, aqin do wati ah. So what you have here is the verb changing to basically an adjective. So for example, so we said aqin aanax, do what, someone grew up, do wati ah, the one growing up. Another, you can have Yáay, and then that could go into ḥusteeyí, the good one, or ones. So there's a couple of interesting things that are going on here. This suffix is a little bit different than the one that shows possession. This one says it's turning this verb into an attribute. So it follows all the same rules, except it always is low. So it causes the T to change to a D, and then it stays low, and then you can have after it, which is another pronoun, which means some of them or one of them. Okay.
So does that become the one who's not quite grown up?
Yeah, the one who has grown up the least, maybe. Which could be a strange thing to say, but we'll leave it at that. The younger one, I don't know. Who knows why he said that?
Is that a Raven specific like vocab? Like only Raven would say something like that, or
He tends to say weird things. Sometimes the concepts are weird. And then when you get into like this, another really fun part of this project is George and Marge were master speakers. Like they were so good, but they didn't really know the Raven stories. And so a lot of the work I did with them was translating these really old Raven stories. And then they were learning those stories as we were going. And those were going from Tlingit to English. And in those stories, you get really big, weird things, like where Raven will say something like, is there no way that you could maybe not trade that to me? And it gets grammatically super complicated. And some of the things, like it's very, like there's this one, he says, Aduski kakanakankahashi. He's inside of a whale. And it means who could cut me out of here. But he's saying, Aduski, who maybe, kakanach, over a person, ankahashi, let them cut over me. Let them cut over. It doesn't make any sense. Who could maybe let someone cut over a person? It's kind of how you could translate it. And I think that's why people do what he wants, because they're like, what? I don't know. There's something about, and so,
okay.
yeah, and so sometimes in these stories, because they go from English to Tlingit, usually he's saying something weird, like something unusual. Okay. Who wants to read this one?
Yáay Hít, Yáay Hít, Yáay Hít, Yak tlak tool.aan teen, tlak doin, ʼatánk.
Sheesh. Okay. So here's the first part. We're sort of like grabbing chunks of information, right? So this would be the whole phrase. And there's multiple phrases that get linked together. And the more you work with Tlingit, the more you're able to spot them. Yáay Hít, Yáay. What do you think we got here? It's going to be the same. We've looked at this sha verb before.
Is it like the good leader? The good.
Well, there's good, but if we go back to the sha verb that we looked up, it's this same one,
Oh, the marrying.
which I guess has a command from sha.
It is good to marry.
So it's good. And in this case, you and what we have here in this, and this is kind of hard to tell, is we have 0 for them, I for you, 0 for a classifier, sha, and then this one, which is tying this verb to this other one. So in this case, you are the one, so this is, we also are switching here. So Raven says that, and now we're switching. Now this guy he's talking to Raven now, which is not, maybe not clearly signaled in the text. And so we had to think about that. I could say so I could take care of that by saying, honey.
The ʼatánk would be my daughter, though, hey?
Yes. So it's good that you marry my daughter. Okay, so there we've got that. Yáay Hít. Now this is all one thing. This is the next chunk. Teidí. Khan yakisaka. This one's a little chunkier.
Okay.
Oh, I guess
One, my one.
it should probably be its own sentence. I gotta go back and fix this. Okay. One. And oh, that should be low. Oops. Catch it. See, I catch all my errors while I do this stuff. I make mistakes all the time, so don't worry about mistakes. Someone tried to give me a real hard time about it one time.
One thing is,
One thing, right? So ḳusteeyí. This also shows us a pattern. How many of them are there? I tried for a long time to get this phrase. Nusk yatiyi kus we cake. Nusk yatiyi kus we cake. This phrase comes from Teslin. Because we looked out the window and we saw it.
You said yati is things?
Well, okay, so yati is to be. Yatiyi blank, the thing that is whatever. So this is how you could say this. Like you could say, Nusk yatiyi awa akhyetki, or Nusk yati awa akhyetki. I have 3 kids. They are, this is saying, it is one. Something is one. Nusk yatiyi at, it is 3. 3, it is foot that dog. That is the magic of how you say a 3-legged dog, which took me so long to figure out how to say. Naskiti cake. So we have one thing. So the ut is something. Ut. Something is one. Hua is the short form of kua, though. Then we get khan yakisaka, which we might have to go dig around for.
Is the on the with me?
Yes. So a'in can become khan. So if we go back to that akaawa, you could say khan kananik. Tell it to me. Because he told me, I just heard some juicy gossip. I heard some juicy gossip. Khan kananik. Wait, neek. Okay. So to me, one thing though, to me, then we get yak qisaka.
is that future?
That is future. You are going to. And that the kakissa, that's what gives it away. Kakissa. That is you. And when we look at this, the second person future, we can have kaki, gaki, and then we can have a whole bunch that could substitute this vowel. Kakissa, kakisha, kakisha. But it's going to have that combination in there. And so what we're going to look for is a verb that has ya and an S classifier and ka. We're going to go look for that in the verb dictionary. So we go look for the root. We're looking for ka. Go down. We get ka, and then we're looking for ya and an S classifier, which is right here. Yasaka. Confess, acknowledge, declare, charge, set the price for, tell, say to, ask to do, promise. That's the one we're looking at. So you are going to promise, and it's right here. It says ká'in yáwsaká. And so kún right here, coming back to ach'in, these are just some things. Just like ach'in can become chan, oops, ká'in can become kún. That's why you say ḳugáasʼ Shaawát, teaches to people. One thing though, and you are going to promise me tógtá'aan team.
Always kind.
What's the teen part?
Always with kindness.
Always with kindness. So tool'aan is the noun form of the verb tlél. It means kindness. Tool'aan with an I would mean they are kind. Tógtá'ín I tógtá'aan.
Always with her, you will be kind.
Yes, and we do have like a hortative form of the verb, kind of. And so, but we'll just say you will always be kind to her. So these are ones like the do'in, ach'in, ká'in. Sometimes we're using this as with, and sometimes it's to. Just kind of depends. Okay, yuck, A. Cruising through this first page. How about this one? I will help you all with the first verb.
Tlél unatine qua igach tlél.
Sheesh. So I will give, so if I were to, there was a suffix on here which has to do with, we call it conditional. If this thing, then there's going to be this other thing. Okay, so it sets up a big if clause. But if I were just to say this verb without that, you would have uti. Does anybody know the positive form of tlél uti? Yáay. So when we got unatini is when tlél uti. So you really get if it isn't that way. Okay? So I'm just going to give you that because that's a big monster. It's kind of a monster of this sort of same verb. The reason why it's kind of monstrous is because it's also negative. These are not very common. These are not things where you say, when I go to the store, I'll get this, like these are bigger conceptual cause-effect things. Like if you do this other, it's usually like some sort of consequence is coming, some sort of other thing is coming. And so we'll keep an eye out for them. It is called, like when you go here, as we sort of see these, I'll just point them out that most of them are listed under here, way down to conditional. Asheni. So this is, like if you were going to use this, you're probably getting into this big consequence thing, like if you're saying, boy, that person's really mean, if they marry them, they're gonna have a hard life, or something like that. Or or maybe it's a good thing, maybe it goes the other way too, right? If they marry them, they're gonna have good fortune, right? And we got though. What about ʻguásʼ Shaawát?
I'm going to do something to you.
Well, there is, so much like we saw this kaqé for like you are going to, and then and sometimes this is kaqé. We also have kuqa or kuqwa, I'm going to, and then we have gachtu or gachtu, we are going to. You also have this other one, which is, this one has kind of three options. So you have kuqa, you have kuqwa, and then you have guxla, guxsha, guxta, guxsa. They are going to. So now it's talking about a third person, but they are going to do something to you. And let's go look up eat and see what we got. Back to the verb dictionary. We are looking for eat. TL apostrophe. Shitlit, L classifier, there it is. Abandon, desert, leave, throw away, dispose of, divorce, fire from a job. So
In other words, it's leave with a bad connotation.
yes. And so we can, we'll get rid of all this stuff. If it isn't that way, she is going to leave you or throw you out, divorce you, however we want to sort of do that last one. That does get us to Yéis ayawsaka tluk isitin kechat to tool.aan. Raven says to him, I will always be kind with your daughter.
Quick question.
Ah.
When you're thinking of like translating the sentences into English, so do you like make that executive decision not to use words like divorce and stuff like that because that's how they wouldn't have said it back then, and you just leave it at leave because of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you kind of, and you all will become translators and you all will become teachers. The other day someone said, I remember one time he said, we'll all become teachers. I thought, not me, and I'm a teacher. So it's like, ha ha. But as you become translators, you will have decisions to make. And some of those decisions will be like, how am I going to take care of the word order? Because like, as you see, what we're doing here is we're translating by chunks and then just kind of rewriting it so it fits in English. But the other part is just saying like, yeah, what should this be? That could be throw you out. That could be divorce you. And it's just sort of like what feels right. And so we kind of have a younger audience in mind, so I probably would say this one. But that, if I was talking to someone who was married, like, if I was saying this, like, yeah, they're gonna divorce you, right? So that's kind of what you're saying here as well.
So also, I guess, taking into consideration who's going to be learning it too.
Yeah,
Something. Okay.
and sometimes the context, the story, but yeah.
Okay.
And then divorce it's kind of a loaded word too, right? It's like, but it does happen,
Well, it could be like triggering for a little kid too.
right? Because
It's like
maybe they
going
got
back
divorced
home,
parents, right? Which, this is gonna have even more triggering stuff. Raven stories.
The divorce is
That's
the least
just-
of their worries.
Right. It's gonna happen. I'm sorry, but yeah. We'll get to that part.
And because this is a Raven story, and we aren't all the way through, we know that something is going to happen.
There's a lie on page 7. Or a promise to be broken. Let's just say that.
Foreshadowing. Things
Right?
like that.
There's just a whole bunch of that. And just same with, But it's so complicated too, because some of them, he's just like, that's not right. We got to get that for the poor people. Then he steals it and gives it to the poor people. But then other times he's like, you're delicious. I think I'll kill you and eat you. So they're complicated.
Well, I don't think, the thing is, the Christian concept of God, which is what Paul came here with, is very simple. It gets more complicated, but it can be really simplified.
Mm-hmm.
And Raven just isn't like, I mean, there's nothing like that at all.
Right.
Raven is inherently complicated and never really simplified. You just look at a different aspect of Raven.
Yeah, it's like something that's always shifting, right? It's always shifting.
And
Okay.
there's not the sense of moral certitude and judgment
Right.
that Christian religion and morals impose, because
So, okay, we started this class with some choice phrases, so we'll end this class with another choice phrase. So there is a story, Raven and the Deer. And the way that that story ends is like, it's very interesting because he tricks the deer. He wanted the deer to die so he could eat him. But then when he dies, he flies down and he says, ʼatánk, which means my little squeaky fart. And I don't know why he called him that, but that's what he did. And then the story goes, Tlél shita du G, ach away du tuk wushnach awucha, which is he didn't have a knife, that's why he ate him through his butthole. That's how the story is supposed to end. Not everybody includes that line, but that's the way it goes. So I brought that up because my mom was living in Skagway and a tour bus driver came to her because she was working for the tribe and said, I would like to tell Raven stories on my tour bus, but I don't fully understand who Raven is. Is Raven like God? So she writes me, and so I wrote back and I said, well, tell the person that Raven's not really God. Raven's a trickster character, but it's complicated because Raven also made the world and gave us a whole bunch of stuff, and we say prayers to Raven, but we also have a word for a single God, so it's complicated. So then she tried to explain that to this person who said, okay, so is Raven like an angel or a prophet then? And I got frustrated because it has to fit into their narrative, so I said, tell them that Raven ate deer through the butthole, and what kind of angel would do that? That's my simplified view of angels too. So on that note, we'll wrap it up. Gáasʼ cheese, tlél.
Goodness cheese.
We might have some guests on Thursday who are visiting from Dakka on Idach. So but they might not come. They might be tired. We'll see. See you folks on Thursday. We'll finish this and do a bit more grammar stuff. Cheese.
Cheese.
Sheesh.
Echa.
Gauch age I uaha.
Chonachoi, Gáasʼ cheese, ach tuasagu.
When should I bring it by?
Kwashiachana, kwasekanen. There works.
Say gunnin?
Ichide kushka kwatatan. I'll thumbtack you later.
Cheese.
Gáasʼ cheese.